All right, now we're joined by Zachary DeWolf, who's running for School Board District 5. So go ahead with a 2-minute introduction.
All right, thank you so much. Yes, my name is Zachary DeWolf. I am running for Seattle School Board District 5, which covers Capitol Hill, Central District, Downtown, and the International District. I am really, really excited to jump into this race for really one reason. I've been a part of the Capitol Community Council for about 3 years as the president, and part of our neighborhood obviously covers certain schools, and one of those schools in my neighborhood is Lowell Elementary. And Lowell Elementary has some really exciting things happening there, and also it's vastly underfunded, and frankly, students are being forgotten, it feels like, and it really came down to feeling like, what are the ways that I can be involved in making the lives of these kids better? I've certainly tried to do whatever I can to create community around kids, whether it's trying to make our city more affordable, making transportation access more accessible. So this is really just in line with a commitment and a passion to serve and to be a part of community service in my community. I've really done a lot of work here in the community, from activism with, like I said, the Capitol Community Council as our president. I'm formerly at the Pride Foundation as our Director of Communications and Education, former Peace Corps volunteer in Belize, which is probably one of my most exciting kind of experiences to date, besides obviously today, so thank you. In the Peace Corps, I actually spent a lot of time in the schools there. I was self-taught. I taught myself how to read and write in Braille, and also kind of rebuilt and staffed and reimagined or re-energized one of the libraries that I worked at, the St. Peter's Anglican School. So certainly kids are an important and critical part of our community. I don't have children myself, but I don't think I have to have children to love and support children. They often are the most vulnerable and the most marginalized, and they don't necessarily have a voice. So I want to be that voice for them. And someday I'm going to be a dad, and I want to send my kids to schools we can all be proud of.
Great, thank you. So now we have our 4 prepared questions that we're asking all candidates for school board. These are 2-minute answers. And for simplicity, I'm just going to read them myself. So number 1, a 2-part question. What specific actions can the school board take to help assure equal educational opportunities and help close the achievement equal opportunity gap? And how do you see stopping the suspension, expulsion, prison pipeline that is affecting so many kids?
Okay. Can you ask the first one again? These are really great questions. I want to make sure I answer them as well as I can.
Absolutely. What specific actions can the school board take to help assure equal educational opportunities and help close the achievement equal opportunity gap?
Yeah. So I think one of the things that really going to be important is just funding our basic education. Obviously, we know that the schools have been underfunded for more than 3 decades. And frankly, that requires, because of those gaps in funding, requires teachers and parents to actually do some of the work in funding their schools. So I think a part of that is what are the ways that we can get creative around funding? Certainly we live in a really interesting time with Trump as our president, but there are certain ideas out there that I think are of interest, and I would be really excited to explore. A couple of parents I've been able to speak to have talked about the idea of pooling resources from PTAs across the district and being able to kind of use those resources a little bit more equitably across the system, knowing that schools like Stevens, parents can raise upwards of $300,000 a year, and schools like Lowell can't raise even a tenth of that. So looking at the ways that we can get creative about funding the schools and kind of putting money back into some of those gaps. But I also think what would be really creative would be sorry, that's my dog there. What would be really important to both build and mend public and private partnerships. So, I think one of the things that would be, if people are asking themselves, what can I do as a good neighbor? Certainly there are schools that are surrounded by folks that work at places like big corporations, right? I'm not necessarily saying I'm into the privatization or corporatization takeover of our schools. By no means am I saying that, but I think that there are certainly ways to get creative with foundations and corporations in funding our schools. And if we have a ton of these tech giants of industry in our communities, then and their kids are going to our schools, then they can be a part of getting creative about how do we provide resources to these schools. Additionally, one of the things that we've been able to do at the Seattle Housing Authority, of which I'm a commissioner, one of the projects and initiatives that I've been really excited about is our Home from School program. So it's actually about increasing academic success for students by providing them just with a reliable place to live. We're piloting this at Bailey Gassert, which is about one-fifth of the students are experiencing homelessness, and so it's about providing resources to get these students and their families housed. And we've seen this used at Tacoma at the McCarver Elementary, and it's raised reading rates and it's decreased turnover. So I think it's about getting creative.
Yeah, we're at 2 minutes, so I need to, at this point, I need to interrupt.
Sorry, I will.
That's all right. I know you're excited. That's awesome. So question number 2, how do you view the role of a school board member in terms of district governance? Do you believe it is the role of a school board member to advocate on behalf of the public with administrative staff?
Yes, absolutely. I think one of the things that I've been, I want to be really frank, is that part of what I've, I know I come into this race with a different background. I think that's one of my assets. I've spent a lot of my time, whether it's with the Capitol Community Council, whether it's with the 43rd Dems, SHA, Gender Justice League, the Washington Family Unity Act work group, any of the things that I've been able to serve and kind of give back to, all comes back to creating community and creating community around people that are marginalized and that are often voiceless. And those tend to be kids. And so it's been really exciting to kind of create community around kids. I know that there are certain parents that I've been able to meet with in the last week, and they often feel like, their district representative doesn't meet them, doesn't come to the school, hasn't heard their issues, and hasn't advocated on their behalf. And I think that's what's really exciting about my race and my candidacy is that, frankly, I'm in a real deep discovery phase. I don't know every issue like a parent. I don't know every issue like a student. I don't know every issue like a teacher. But what's been really exciting is to have a different eye and a different take on these issues from the perspective of somebody just learning about it. And I come from many different, right now I'm managing the action plan for single adults and veterans across King County at All Home, and what are the ways that we're addressing homelessness, right? So bringing all these different experiences that I have, whether it's from the Native American community, whether it's from the queer community, whether it's from my work in homelessness and housing, how can I actually bring all that experience, even if I'm not part of the education system now? How do I get creative about that? Listen to the people, whether it's our students or parents or teachers, and actually take their concerns and their issues up to the school board, because I feel like that has not happened a lot. And I think that's what's been really exciting about this last week, too, is just people really just want to be heard, and they want to make sure that the folks that are caring and that are serving for their kids are listening to them. And I think school board members have a lot of potential. And I think certainly our district has a lot of potential.
Great. Question number 3, what are your priorities and how do you propose SPS finds the necessary funds to address the classroom infrastructure needs of the district? Please specifically address the needs of Seattle's growing North Downtown population for an elementary school as well as other neighborhoods in Seattle.
Great question. Would you mind asking it just one more time? I want to make sure I write everything down.
Of course. What are your priorities and how do you propose SPS finds the necessary funds to address the classroom infrastructure needs of the district? Please specifically address the needs of Seattle's growing North Downtown population for an elementary school as well as other neighborhoods in Seattle.
That's good. Okay. Thank you. Great question. So, historically, the Seattle Public Schools and our local government, both King County and Seattle, have been in silos. And I think that this is certainly a catchphrase, but it tends to ring true. And it's made working across some of these different systems and King County and the city really difficult. Right now, there's a really exciting example. Deborah Juarez, who has endorsed me, along with Jill Geary, Colleen Eckerhawk, Nicole Macri, and Danny Eschini. Deborah Juarez and I I'm supporting her on her work to bring soda tax dollars to increasing food access for students. Now, we know that children can't think, they can't learn, they can't focus or behave if they're hungry. And I actually think that Seattle Public Schools should be providing healthy meals. So, for example, this is one of the ways that I think we can get creative and work across, whether it's and build partnerships and certainly mend those partnerships with folks like the City of Seattle and county government, and then get creative, like I was saying earlier, whether it's working with folks like Seattle Housing Authority or working, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, for example, ended up supporting with a large amount of money also with Bailey Gasser to address kind of homelessness in our schools. So what are the ways we can work with foundations to address some of the needs that our students are facing? I think it's about getting creative. I know I have a lot of experience working across many of these different issues and kind of bringing people together and getting creative about how do we address problems. So I think it'd be really exciting to continue to get creative, whether it's working with folks at the City Council on how do we address some of these budget gaps in the ways that we can't provide, or whether it's infrastructure or funding for buses, right? How do we get creative and work with our local partners?
Great. Question number 4 is very short. What do you think the district's testing policy should be? Well,
that is certainly a loaded question. I'm really excited that we have done away with high-stakes testing. I don't think teachers should be judged or connected to the outcomes of those tests. We shouldn't, and we also shouldn't be preventing students from going to the next level or graduating based on a test like high-stakes testing. I do believe that in general, testing is really great. I'm certainly not saying across the board, but I think if you look at examples or think about teachers in the classroom, I think it's valuable to be checking on how your students are doing, how they're doing on certain topics, whether it's certainly very difficult subjects for me, like science. I could not break apart that owl pellet thing, stuff like that. If you want to support, be able to support teachers doing those kind of testing in the classroom, that's just seeing, are you understanding this topic? But when it comes to these standardized tests, I think when we're pulling students out of classroom or making them spend more and more time doing these standardized testing, I think in that way I'm not necessarily a fan of kind of adding more and more of these assessment tests that aren't able to do anything kind of right away, right? They're just testing, and then you don't find out maybe there's results till the summer, so then you can't actually address that need with that student. But I think certainly along the school year, teachers being able to test our students is great. I think if we're over-testing them by these standardized testings, then I certainly think we need to examine that and be really, really thoughtful about how much we're doing that, because it certainly can be a burden to our students and our parents.
Great, thank you. So now we'll move on to follow-up questions. These are 1-minute answers, and we'll start with Robert.
Okay, hello, Zach. Robert
Hi,
Cruikshank.
Robert.
Same question I've asked everyone today. What is your position on charter schools? And if you are elected, will you commit to continuing the current school board policy of refusing to authorize new charter schools in Seattle?
Well, abso-effing-lutely. Yes. Look, I don't support charter schools. They're already declared unconstitutional. Seattle Public Schools don't and shouldn't have anything to do with them. And frankly, they take money away from our public schools from the public schools who often most need the support and have not necessarily been shown to close the achievement gap. So I'm not drinking that Kool-Aid.
Great. Additional questions? Yeah, Brittany.
Hi, Brittany Bollet.
Hi.
I have another question I've been asking a lot of people. What place do you see for alternative teaching methods like Montessori and Waldorf within the Seattle public school system?
That's a great question. Can you describe a little bit more what you're saying? There was a word in there that it was a little bit. I want to make sure I'm understanding what you're saying.
Alternative teaching methods like Montessori and Waldorf.
Yes. Do I think that they should be incorporated within our Seattle public schools?
What place do you see for them? Yes.
Look, my sister, I took hooked on phonics in the 80s or whenever I was a kid. My sister went to Montessori. I think that Montessori certainly has a lot of value, and I really appreciate the creative way that they approach education for young kids. I think that there's a place for it in our public schools. I'm supportive of ways that we're getting creative. I think that, I'd just be really cautious about making sure that it's not continuing to kind of build that gap between our students of color and our non-students of color, and making sure that it is accessible. I know that we had support from our tribe to be able to pay for that, but I don't know. There are certainly other students, especially students of color, who may not have that support, and so want to make sure that we're thoughtful if that as a part of our Seattle Public Schools.
All right.
Thank you.
Additional questions?
Sorry.
That's all right.
That's Maya.
Maya.
I told her to keep it down. She really loves Seattle Public Schools too.
Make sure you get a registered to vote. All right, Robert has another question.
Yeah, so there's always a lot of pressure from vendors who sell educational technology products who want public schools to adopt as much of that as possible, and some of them even go so far as to say that, we should follow certain models of replacing teachers with iPads and having, a facilitator in a classroom with, 50 kids to a class. And there are people, in SPS who think that's a great idea. What's your position on the appropriate use of technology in the classroom?
Yeah, that's a great question. Look, I mean, we're a technology world. I think students should certainly be adept and understand technology. It's going to be fast moving. It's going to be different. I'm sure in 5 years, even maybe tomorrow, there's going to be something new. And I'm only 30, but maybe I won't understand because it's just so quick moving. And I certainly want to support students in understanding technology. It's going to be a really important part of our lives. At the same time, I really don't, I'm not a fan of the ways in which technology kind of replaces both relationships and building community. My service and my passion for what I do really comes from a deep desire to both build community, but also create community around my people, whether it's queer people, whether it's young people. I think building relationships is important. And if we were to move to a model where having students learn 52 a classroom all by technology, I wouldn't be supportive of that. I've had really great teachers in my life that have been great influence, not just necessarily what they taught me in the classroom, but just in the ways that they support me as a human, whether, as a queer student trying to figure out life or having problems at home. Teachers are critical to a student's life.
Great, thank you. Additional questions in the room? Anybody? Zach, I was wondering if you could say, if you were elected, you got a 4-year term, what would you want to say that you accomplished in that 4-year term? What's, even if it's outside the box, what is it you want to get done?
I think the high level is I want to make sure that every single student understands and feels that their life matters. There are so many examples, whether it's students experiencing homelessness, whether it's our students who are undocumented, whether it's our students who are Muslim, whether it's students living with disabilities. So many students feel left out. They feel voiceless. They feel disempowered. They don't feel like their lives matter. So at the high level, it's about making sure that every student feels like they matter and empowered within that. And that's, for me, where I feel like students are really going to find a place in getting excited about education. I think kind of the nitty-gritty of what I would love to accomplish, part of it would be how to be creative with the ways that we are educating students. And part of that is, are we incorporating certain models like outdoor education? Are we, sorry, I heard that little dinger.
Yeah, that was, go ahead and finish your sentence if you'd like, though.
Sorry, what was that?
Oh, if you wanted to finish your sentence, I wanted to give you that opportunity.
Yeah, just, thinking about how we're getting creative, too, about approaching our public schools, whether it's, doing more outdoor education. Certainly, we know through research that being outdoors, actually getting our fingers and hands in the dirt is super good for our mental health. And how are we supporting the full life of a student as well, right? So if in my 4-year term, I really hope that we're trying to find ways to really support students in all parts of their lives. Young people are just marginalized and they're vulnerable, and when they can't eat, when they don't have a place to live, they can't learn. And so we have to also get creative, even if we're in this budget crunch, to really address some of the other needs that these students are having. Because one of the indicators, and one of my big passions, is around homelessness. Biggest indicators of if you're going to experience homelessness is if you've had a previous episode where you've experienced homelessness. We've had 30% of our students in Lowell who are experiencing homelessness. It really scares me to think that they may experience that again, and especially as adults. So really supporting the full life of the student would be my, kind of my ultimate goal.
Great. So we are about out of time. If you want to take 30 seconds for a closing statement.
Yeah. I just wanted to say, when I was in the Peace Corps, I had a real exciting opportunity. My project wasn't actually around education. My main project was working with village councils, but I wanted to volunteer at the local school, and they didn't have a library. They had one, but it was locked up, dusty, cobwebs, and they also didn't have anybody to support their students that were visually impaired. And it was there, kind of in that experience of seeing that students really, really did want to learn and read, and also that when students, especially like one of the students that I tutored, Diami, when he was able to have Braille, when he was able to have materials and resources, and actually, I transcribed a few books, when he was able to take those books home, he felt seen. And it's a really exciting time in a child's life. And if we can just support them from the beginning, then I truly believe that they're going to have long-term educational success. So I'm just excited to be in a position to really affirm that your life as a student matters, and then especially to the kids who are queer. I know I had many interesting experiences as a queer kid in public schools, and if I could just be at least a resource, a role model, and somebody who's going to be a champion for the voice of the folks that don't often feel they have a voice, then certainly that would be my greatest accomplishment. I'd be so grateful to serve on the Seattle School Board for District 5.
All right. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.